Welcome to Fertility Village. This is your weekly live talk show where community and support come together. With rotating hosts, expert guests, and meaningful conversations, we're here to guide you through the highs and the lows of infertility. Whether you're searching for answers, seeking advice, or just looking for a special place to belong, Fertility Village is your space to connect, learn, and grow. Because it really does take a village, and we are here for you every step of the way. Thanks for joining. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Fertility Village Live. It's Erin here. I am solo hosting tonight. Ashley is away. I actually do have a little co-host here who you can't see. My French bulldog is sleeping next to me. So if you hear any weird snoring or sounds coming out of the space that I'm in, I swear it's just my bulldog. So we'll start with that. But we are so excited tonight to welcome Delia to the stage. Welcome to Fertility Village Live, Delia.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're here. And as many of you know, October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, which is really just a time to honor the babies that are gone too soon and hold space for all the families that are navigating grief after loss. And we invited Delia here because she specializes in this. She's a registered psychotherapist. She specializes in trauma therapy and grief support. So we're going to be talking about the trauma and complexity of infertility grief, as well as the healing process after pregnancy loss, stillbirth, and reproductive challenges. So we're excited to have this conversation. Bit of a heavy one tonight, but we're going to keep it as light as possible. But keeping in mind that this is such an important topic, so many people in our community and women specifically who have, and I mean, obviously in a couple situation, the other partner would feel the loss, but it's just different when the woman is going through the loss of this life that they have, or the loss of a cycle, or the loss of the hope that we feel when we like don't get any embryos, or there's so many losses through infertility. So we're obviously having a focus on pregnancy and infant loss awareness, but we also want to talk about, the fertility, the loss of a cycle, all the different loss that we go through. So we're going to get into it. So thank you for being us here. Why don't you just start with telling us a little bit about your background and what led you into this work?
Yeah. So as you already mentioned, I'm a registered psychotherapist, and I specialize in fertility counseling, reproductive trauma, and also pregnancy loss. I work primarily with individuals and couples who struggle to conceive. And this is what I usually kind of describe as, people going through the infertility maze. And basically, what led me to this work is not only my clinical background, but also personal experience. So I know firsthand what it's like when your life is all about appointments, medications, injections, and, that waiting game of trying to conceive. So it's basically this lived experience that really helped me to connect with clients, because over the years, what I've came to realize is this journey isn't about the outcomes, but also surviving the in between. And that's where I found that therapy to be very crucial.
I love that. This journey is not about the outcomes, but surviving the in-between. That's so powerful, because it is like we have to survive to get to the next phase, right? We have to survive to get to the next part of the journey. But like, I know there were so many times on my own journey that I was like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to die. Like, not that I had suicidal thoughts, but I just felt like I'm going to die. Like, that was the intensity of the emotion around this journey. And if this doesn't work, I don't know how I'm going to go on. It was just like this. It was so intense.
Yeah, it can be devastating, right? It's so complex and lonely when it comes down to it. And you're right. It's almost like we cannot imagine a future without having this. So it's, it's so outside of our control, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are familiar with grief in the context of death, because that's what we're used to really like relating grief to. But ultimately, like, grief is when we're in the place of mourning a loss. So I think through infertility, it's a little bit less understood. So how can you explain the kind of grief to your client with regards to infertility? It's super complex. So let's just talk about grief for a little bit, because I think we should get to the bottom of, all the
Mhm.
shapes and sizes of this thing that we are all faced with.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, that's such a good question. And I find that, with infertility grief, it comes in so many shapes and sizes. And, like it's
Mm-hmm.
never really linear. And it can be complex in the sense that it's kind of unique to every single individual, right? Like, so we have some people that are more resilient, they're dealing with it a bit better. But then there's others that they're struggling a lot more. But basically, the way I explain it to my clients is I talk a lot about the invisible aspect of it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about technical terms, this is something called disenfranchised grief. So that is
Mm-hmm.
basically the grief that it's not normally recognized by society. So it's basically it's often is just happening to the person that is going through it. So it's the grief that comes on the inside, and a lot of people can't really see it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it can be really silent and lonely, um,
Mm-hmm.
especially when people aren't really expecting it, or when they're not sharing their fertility journey with friends or family. It's also the stigma about it, right? So that kind of
Yeah.
makes it even more complex.
Yeah.
But I also want to bring up what makes infertility grief so complex is that it's very layered. So I know you said
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning that, like you're not just grieving one loss. So a lot of times we're grieving, like the loss of the future that we imagine. A
Yeah.
lot of times we grieve the loss of the timeline, right? Like we kind of
Yeah.
have a certain, timeline or progress in mind that we think, at a
Mm-hmm.
certain age we're gonna finish, university, we're gonna have our careers, we're gonna meet our partner, and then it all falls into place. And for a lot of people that doesn't happen, right? So it kind of puts a dent into the order that we expect,
Mm-hmm.
and it can feel like a lot.
Yeah.
And what I would also want to add to this is that it's also the loss of innocence. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is that, a lot of the times, pregnancy announcements and baby showers, they ended up becoming more painful than joyful,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to it, right? Because it's a reminder of like something that we don't have yet and others do
Yeah.
have it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That part of the journey. And I mean, I don't know if I've ever met a woman on her fertility journey through the supports that we provide who hasn't been like, baby showers are triggering, pregnant bellies are triggering, maybe the odd one who's like, oh, I can like suck it up or push it down to like, push through. It's for my
Mhm.
friend who's pregnant or my sister or whatever. But for the most part, it's still just this reminder that like they're moving forward and we're stuck here in this horrible hell of limbo without being able to move forward. It's like so far out of our control.
For
Do you think
sure.
there's like grief attached to lack of control?
Yes, for sure. Well, the lack of control, especially in this journey in the infertility, in the infertility maze that I mentioned before,
Yeah.
everything is uncertain, right? Everything is in the
Yeah.
unknown, and like it can really rock your boat when it comes to that.
Mhm.
But I wanted to like kind of go back a little bit to what you said, that there are women that they kind of put a face mask on, and they kind of
Mhm.
they go to the baby shower, they deal with the pregnancy announcement in such a way, but deep down they're still experiencing that sadness. And the thing is, when we're experiencing that sadness, it has nothing to do with us not being happy for the other person, but it's kind of a reminder of like what we don't have, right? So it's like that punch in the gut of what happened. So yeah, it makes it complicated. I think this makes it even more complicated than any other type of grief,
Yeah.
because there's kind of like no clear beginning or end to this, right? So
Yeah.
it's, for a lot of
Totally.
people, it's very cyclical, and it's kind of reoccurring. Every month can bring a new wave of loss. So even if you're having a month that you feel a little bit better, you feel that you've already kind of grieved and you're on a good path, then something could happen, right? Yeah. So it can be that ongoing
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
heartbreak, no clear endpoint, no rituals, no funeral, like compared to other griefs that we have.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. It's just this cycle that you can never get off. That's why I used to explain it like it's a roller coaster. You never know if you're going to be up or down or up or down, but like it never stops. And
Mhm.
even after having, if you have, we'll call it success in the form of a baby, and then move forward into like postpartum motherhood, there's still so many triggers. Like, why does that happen? Is it because the grief is so complex, or like we never actually move through it. I think I heard somebody say one time, like, you never actually get over grief. Like, grief never really like finalizes. You just like make more space to like absorb the grief. It was, I totally
Yeah.
botched that.
Yeah. I like that.
But, yeah.
And the thing is, I actually talk about this with clients as well. The thing is, having a child doesn't cure infertility. So
Yeah.
even if you do get to that end goal that you always dreamed of, you're still gonna have those, like open wounds, basically, that you get triggered sometimes, right? So it could be like 10 years after, when somebody talks about how their daughter or their granddaughter got pregnant so easily, or the first try, or things like that. It would trigger things that you might never think it would come up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And even like back to the baby showers, like I'm 4 years postpartum, 5 years since my last fertility treatment. And I had a baby shower last week, and it was like leading up to it. And I was feeling like my behavior was off. I was like, why am I acting like this or feeling like this? And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this baby shower, I'm triggered by this. And it's like making me a certain way, because it's just still there. It's still there. Yeah. And it just took me a minute to realize. I was like, oh yeah, it's a baby shower. Totally makes sense. Yeah.
For sure.
Crazy.
This is something that we call in therapy emotional flashback, right? It's almost like you're getting a flashback of that, how it felt for you physically, and then also the memory of the feelings that you're getting.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that's so good. Do you want to talk more about the emotional flashback? Because I feel like you have something good there.
Yeah, sure. Well, the thing is, when I know, so when it comes to infertility, a lot of the times we don't refer to it as trauma. But when we think about it, like how trauma affects us from like a body perspective, our bodies remember, right? So all the that you had, all of those, heartbreaks, all of those, like negative cycles, or, like unsuccessful embryo transfer, all of these things, they get stored in our body, right? And a lot of the times we push it down, but then it still comes back when we have that emotional flashback, when something kind of remembers and it triggers you. And sometimes you might feel familiar, like, why am I feeling this way, right? And other times we might think like, this is so random.
Yeah. Totally. And it, like, I think sometimes I probably have these emotional flashbacks and I don't even realize it. Like this one with the baby shower, it was like, oh, I acknowledged and recognized and was able to like, pinpoint it and then deal with it and then enjoy the shower. But probably so many times we have these triggers or these things and then don't even realize like what's triggering us or why we're like just acting off or being angry or having like big feelings or so how can, I mean, I'm going off script here, but how can we recognize and look for those things? Like, do you have any good tips to like how do we like come back to our body? Actually, this is the next question. Like, how does it show up in our body and mind or day to day? And how can we like deal with ourselves? How can we watch for those things or be more aware of like when we're triggered and I mean, we're talking about folks still on a journey, the start of a journey after a loss. I mean, 5-10 years postpartum, you're still triggered by things. Like, what's something that we can watch for and maybe just speak to that?
For sure. And so usually this is something that I think it became one of my motto when it comes to therapy. And I usually try to get my clients and, like myself from a personal perspective, it's all about becoming curious about yourself. So becoming curious about like what happens to you, like what are your patterns, what are your behaviors, like what kind of thoughts you're having, because a lot of the times, thoughts and feelings and behaviors that kind of be interrelated. So perhaps sometimes you might feel it in your body, you might feel the anxiety, and it might be just something that kind of reminds you of it, and you might have just an automatic thought that comes on and without even realizing for it, right? So, and as you were asking me about like the day-to-day living experience and how it comes up like physiologically mostly, so I kind of like, I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier about the trauma. So usually we don't use the word trauma for infertility because people usually imagine trauma as war, car accidents, or natural disasters, right? So something like very significant. But the truth is, when we're thinking about what trauma is not defined by the event, but it's defined by the way our body responds to what feels threatening or
Mm.
what feels unsafe, right? And
Oh,
when we're
that's so good. Wait, I want you to say it again. Say it
yeah.
again for the people in the back. Like what? So give us the definition of trauma, because this is so important
Mhm.
for the folks who are experiencing infertility to get this. Like it's so say it again, because that's really important.
Yeah, so it's basically trauma is not defined by what happened by the event itself, but it's basically the way our body responds to that event or how
Right.
what it feels unsafe or what feels threatening.
Yes. Okay.
So
So
it's
what
not
feels
the
safe and
event, it's
unthreatening,
how
how we respond.
yeah.
So good. I think, yeah, it's so true when you think about the fertility journey. And is it safe to say, like, you spoke about like a car accident being, and people think of that like, oh, I'm, this trauma from a frightening event or a big, like our
Mhm.
body goes into this fight or flight in those like, stress responses in those big moments. But infertility is like a long trauma. It's like it
Mhm.
happens over a long period of time. So it's almost like that analogy when you put a frog in in like water and then turn on the heat,
Yes,
and like he won't get out. He'll just die in there because you turn it up so slowly that eventually you just cook the frog. Whereas if you put him into the hot water, he jumps out, right?
it comes
So
out, yeah.
yeah, this is
Mhm.
like the infertility trauma. It's almost like you don't experience it happening to you. It's like an after, you realize it after, like that traumatized me,
Mhm.
because you like it happens over such a slow, like long process for a lot of people, unless there's a big event where there's like a loss of a baby, or in
Mhm.
those like really bigger instances. I mean, for me, I can like pinpoint the most traumatizing part of my journey was when we found out like the diagnosis, like the moment that we knew like we'll never have a biological child, we'll never have like,
Mhm.
we will need IVF to have a family. That was like for me the defining moment of like, okay, now
Mhm.
I'm like feeling the things. Anyways, I digress, but so speak to like
No, no,
that
it's okay.
long
Mhm.
trauma, and then for those who have experienced like a large event, like how does it feel different?
And I'm glad that you mentioned that. And first of all, I just wanted to say that I'm really sorry for what you've been through. This is never easy for anybody. And
Mm-mm.
the way you explained that, it's almost like somebody like just keep going through the trauma, right? And through the infertility. And that's basically what happens. It's almost like we find that relentless energy that it's almost like it affects us. We're going through the heartbreak, we're feeling the trauma of it all, but we're still pushing through, like we're still kind of like going through. So it's almost like that, that thing. I want to differentiate between a little bit the trauma, because the car
Yeah.
accidents and the natural disasters, this is what we usually refer to as like big T trauma.
Yeah.
That is something that is like automatically
Yeah.
traumatic
Big
for
T like
most
that.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we also refer to something small T traumas, like for like with a little T trauma.
Right. Little T
And
trauma.
this is where infertility actually fits in, right? It's because it's something that happens, that it's not just one big traumatic event, but it's small. It's like the drip by drip. It's like, finding out that, like you have to do another cycle, or finding out that
Yeah.
you're transferred an implant, or all of these
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yes. Would it go into like, would that fall into the same bucket as like somebody who's experienced like emotional abuse from a partner or a parent, or somebody who's like, or physical like over a long period of time and felt like in a similar way, like stuck, or like they couldn't get out, or whatever? Like, is it safe to compare like I mean, we don't compare the different, there's no levels of grief. All grief is grief, and we all
For
like deal
sure.
with it, and all loss is loss. um but would that be a similar like sort of if experience? I'm just thinking of like folks who might be listening to this who have gone through something that's not
Mhm.
infertility, like to relate to what an infertility patient is going through.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, we don't, I mean, we don't really compare the traumatic experiences,
Yeah.
because everybody like deals with it. So it's all about how the nervous system reacts to that threat. But I'm going to go back to, because
Right.
you said, either abuse, emotional abuse, or, like childhood developmental trauma, like it happens in instances. But going back to that, how it relates to infertility trauma is that, remember the definition that I said, that is not the event itself, but it's the way our body responds to what feels
Mm.
threatening. right? So when we're thinking about it, like what
That's
feels
right.
threatening about infertility, right? So infertility, most of the time, it threatens our own identity, right? Like we kind of have that confusion. Who am I if I can't have biological
Yes.
children? Or who am I after so many losses, right? And then it threatens our relationships, or for a lot of people, they tend to distance themselves from other friends that
Mm-hmm.
I have children, or it feels that they're not feeling validated or they're not feeling understood. And then it also threatens the imagined future, right? Because going back to that, like we cannot control this. This is something that it's so uncertain and it's unknown, right?
Yeah.
So in a
Yeah.
nutshell, it kind of threatens something that should have been a given. For a lot
Mm,
of people, like we take this that it's a given that, like whenever
yeah.
you're ready to try to get pregnant, hey, it's gonna happen, right?
Yeah. You think this is my like God-given right to like have a baby. Naturally, we hate that term in our community, but like,
Mhm.
it makes sense in the space of like conceiving in the behind the door of the bedroom compared to in the fertility clinic. But um yeah, that's really good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I may add something else, when we're thinking about, just because I've studied trauma for so long, and it's
Yeah.
even
So
before I
good.
became a psychotherapist, I was a psychometrist and I was doing psychological assessments for traumatic brain injuries. So I have,
Okay.
this passion about like what happens to the brain
Mm.
of trauma.
Yeah. So
But
interesting.
I wanted to kind of like share, like the word trauma itself comes from the Greek word for wound. And
Mm.
I find that like when I realize like where it comes from, I find that it's so, it fits like a glove with an infertility
Yeah.
community, right? Because that's what it does, right? It leaves a
Mhm.
wound,
It
right?
does.
For a lot of people, it's very invisible from the outside, like they don't know what's going on, but it can cut very deep on the inside, for someone that is actually going through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It does leave a wound. There's no doubt about that. I think anybody who's gone through it, to even just for like TTC for a year and then doing IUI and that being successful, like still a wound. Like there's everybody who's gone on this journey that's had any sort of, change to the direction you thought your life was going to go.
Hmm.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
Let's
And
pivot a little bit and talk about. I want to touch on how partners, sorry, grieve differently. So, can you give us some tips on how couples can support one another through loss? And then we're going to
Mhm.
talk a little bit more about stillbirth and pregnancy loss.
Yeah. Okay. So I find that this is such an important question. So because I also do therapy for both individuals and couples,
Oh,
but
we're
I
going to tell
find
everybody where to find you after as well, because
yeah.
this is really important. Yeah.
I find that this is important because different grieving styles, it's pretty much one of the biggest sources of conflict that I
Mm-hmm.
see in couples, dealing with infertility or even after loss. And I think we'll probably do more than 1 hour just for this question on its own.
Yeah.
But
Let's go.
yeah. So partners, are already devastated by the loss.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly they can feel disconnected from the one person who should understand them or who should
Mm-hmm.
feel the same way as they
Yeah.
feel. So I want to emphasize something, that it's completely normal for partners to grieve differently. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not only talking about just a little bit differently, but radically different, right?
Yeah.
So we see that one partner might actually need to talk more about it, while the other doesn't want to talk about it at all, right? So it's almost like I can't deal with this. It's very
Yeah.
triggering. One partner might cry openly while the other distracts themselves with work. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, none of these approaches are wrong, right? So
Yeah.
they're just different, pretty much nervous system responses to that overwhelming pain. And
Mm-hmm.
some people process grief externally by talking and crying, and others they internalize that by needing space or time alone.
Yeah.
But the problem is when we interpret the partner's different grief as not caring or
Mm-hmm.
being emotionally unavailable to us. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where the conflict comes, right? So
Yeah.
what I usually do with couples work is, instead of having that perception, first try to name it. So have that open conversation with your partner, and like you can just say, this is what my grief looks like, this is what I need right now. I kind of need to talk about it, or I need to not talk about it. So whatever
Mm-hmm.
whatever it comes with. So one thing that I like to say is that different doesn't mean less. So just because your
Yeah.
partner deals with it different doesn't mean that it's any less meaningful for them, or that is that any less meaningful in the relationship.
Yeah.
Another thing that I try to do with couples is to try to create kind of like small micro moments like of connection that doesn't
Yeah.
require the same grief. So that could be, have a 10-minute check-in either at nighttime or midday or in the morning or whatever feels right. And the
Yeah.
most important is to just what I said earlier, that like I like to be curious about like patterns and things like that. Try to
Hmm.
get curious instead of becoming defensive about the partner. So
Yeah.
what I mean by that is try to assume a positive intent, right? So assume that just because your partner's grieving differently, that it's not necessarily that they're minimizing the loss or they're not caring about you or they're just trying to forget about it. It's pretty much they're surviving the only way they know how in the moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that can
Yeah.
be powerful, right? Like for couples to kind of like see it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good perspective. And even I think just people hearing that tonight and listening later, um, to hear that like I've been on my own grief journey in the last like year or so, but I feel like there's like, yes, naming it and recognizing it is so powerful. And you get this like wave of empathy for your partner when you realize,
Mhm.
oh, that's grief. Actually, yeah. And I just feel like when you can name it and call it that what it is, it's so much easier to be like, oh, it's you can act like a jerk because you're just grieving or whatever, like when and it's just I mean, it's never okay to like act like a jerk, but do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
there's a lot more like support for your partner when you realize how they're grieving is not number one, like you said, different to you, but
Mhm.
also number two, just like that's their way. So that's so good. I think that's really powerful and for people to hear that. So let's go through some of the emotions or challenges like people face when they've had, especially a loss like a stillbirth or a pregnancy loss. So like you touched on a couple, like, so for folks who are listening to this one, like give me
Mhm.
like tell me what I'm looking for in my partner, like maybe so we can call this grief. Like what are people looking for? What are some of the big emotions and challenges that couples face that aren't
Um,
necessarily talked about openly, or can you give us some more examples?
So one thing that I can tell you like straight from the top of my head is the resentment, right? So like
Oh
when it
yeah.
comes to like in couples, right, we kind of have that resentment that either like I said, that the partner doesn't grieve in the same way, that oh, how come they're dealing much better with it right now and they can put
Hmm.
it behind them, right? So it's like that resentment that can build in the couple. It could also be anger. So a
Hmm.
lot of the times we see the what we call courtesy stigma. So if it's a male factor in fertility or a female factor in fertility, like when it comes to that loss and that grief, emotions can be so raw and heavy that, like that envy and the resentment can come up from that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think like kind of beyond resentment, I think just
Mhm.
um I feel like sometimes there's this constant competition going on where you're like, you know, trying to not you're not like competing with each other, but it's coming across that way because there's this like, you know, I don't know. I just remember back to my journey and like the number of times we looked at each other and we're like, we're on the same team. This is us against
I like that.
infertility.
Yep.
It's us against infertility. It's not like me and you and Howard. It's like, no, we chose us first, and infertility
Mhm.
unfortunately is getting in the way, but like it's us against infertility. Like we're on the same team. How are we gonna tackle this
Yeah.
together?
Yeah. That you have a common enemy, right? The
Yeah,
infertility and the
exactly.
struggle. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm glad that you brought that up, right? Because when we're thinking about how couples and infertility or struggling to conceive or any losses, it can
Hmm.
really put a strain on even like the strongest of relationships. But a
Hmm.
lot of the times, this can actually create a stronger bond and connection between the partners, because
Hmm.
for a lot of people, this is basically the first most intense life crisis that they had to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what infertility is that life crisis that you just kind of learn how do you cope with it on an individual basis, but then also as a couple. Yeah. And it can be
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it was for us. And we were like 10 years married almost when we hit infertility. And so it was like, oh my goodness, like it rocked us. It did. And I think a lot of couples, we hear this on our podcast all the time. Like when we get people to tell their stories, like your relationship might take a hit. Like this is going to be hard. So it's good for people to, I wish they knew that going into the journey, you know, that this is gonna be difficult. So buckle up.
For sure. But you
Get
get
your
to learn.
foundation strong. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you get to learn more about your partner, like, and about
Mhm.
yourself, like how do you deal with certain stuff, like you get to learn about boundaries, you get to learn about so much stuff when it comes to
Yeah.
this. So there are
Yeah.
some silver linings when it comes to this,
Totally.
even
It's
though it
so
doesn't
true.
feel
And
that
if
way.
you can see it that way, that's so key. It's so important. So, can you walk us through some of the therapeutic approaches you use when working with clients who are processing infertility trauma and loss?
Yeah. So basically, I use an eclectic and integrative approach because I believe, like meeting clients where they are in the moment. So for someone who has just experienced, for example, an unsuccessful embryo transfer or a negative pregnancy test or a miscarriage, my initial focus would be to go to the somatic and working with the body through the grief, because when we're grieving, our natural impulse is to run away from the pain, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
cannot sit with the heavy, raw emotions. So we try to push it down to suppress what we're feeling. But the thing is, grief is not just emotional, it kind of lives in our bodies. So
Yeah.
you might notice that tightness in the chest, that heaviness in the stomach, like that heightened anxiety or kind of an overwhelming sense of unease. So I start by creating kind of safety in the body and learning how to stay present with those sensations instead of like either running away from them, suppressing them, or avoiding them. And then when clients are ready to process the actual traumatic memories, my go-to modality is accelerated resolution therapy or
Okay.
ART. So many of you may have heard of EMDR, which
Yep.
stands for eye movement and desensitization and reprocessing. Such a mouthful every time
It
I
is.
try to say it. And ART works very similarly. So they both use bilateral stimulation and guided eye movements to help the brain reprocess the traumatic memories. Um, what I love a lot about ART is that it allows clients to keep the facts of what happened, but the memory is no
Mhm.
longer hijacking their nervous system. So
Mm.
they're able to kind of remember, like they remember the miscarriage, they remember the, like the moment when they got the phone call or the moment when they went for the ultrasound. They feel the pain, but it doesn't hijack the nervous system. They don't go into that full panic mode. So this type
Wow.
of therapy is very effective for that kind of like repetitive trauma, the one that we talked about a little bit earlier, right? That it's
Yeah.
coming and coming.
I didn't even know that that was possible that you could do that to your brain. Like, that's so
Mhm.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Mhm.
Especially if there's something that feels like it is impacting still the day, um, ongoing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. So for somebody who's feeling stuck in their grief and isn't sure how to move forward, what would you recommend for them?
That's wow, what a really good question, right? Because we get that feeling of being stuck in this journey a lot. So it's almost like at
Oh
every
yeah.
single turn we kind of feel stuck. But when somebody feels stuck in their grief in this journey, the first thing that I want to do is validate. So feeling stuck isn't a sign that something's wrong with them or that something is broken, but it's often, just your nervous system telling you that this loss might require more time and processing than you could have anticipated, and that's completely normal. um,
Yeah.
so that would like validate, like kind of normalize the feelings.
Yeah.
And then like my first step that I would try to, offer to the clients is to always give yourself permission to just simply be where you are without having any judgment, right? Because in this journey, a lot of us, we know that we kind of have that self-induced shame or that self-induced anger that I shouldn't feel this way, I should be stronger,
Mm-hmm.
I should be like,
Mm-hmm.
all the shoulds.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times it's just being where you are without judging that, and you don't need to have all the answers right now. And what we know from trauma research is that our bodies and minds actually need time to integrate the loss.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's an important piece of it, right? Like to give yourself permission to just be where you are.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's like
It's
easy to
hard.
say, but it's so hard to do
Yeah.
it actually. especially like, I mean, a lot of type A women out there with infertility, just like trying to control every single
Mhm.
step of the way. And it's so difficult because that you cannot control this. There's just like, I don't know, we talk a lot about like controlling what you can control.
Mhm.
You know, I sometimes use that as a way to get unstuck. Actually for me, I've found like ongoing, the stuck is actually my trigger to
Mm,
like
mhm.
in everything in my life. If I'm like I'm stuck in this situation or in this moment, in this like whatever the case may be, I'm like, this is my trigger, and it puts me back into my like infertility brain. And
Mm.
if I
Okay.
get if I'm like if I can't move forward, it's the weirdest thing. So I feel like I learned how to unstick myself by
Yeah, yeah.
controlling the, so I go back to this like coping with infertility, like control what I can control in this moment to like get through being stuck.
Mhm. So what you just explained is exactly the hijack that happens, right?
Yeah,
When we get
exactly.
triggered.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it's being stuck. So it's like in any situation with work or if it's with family, like, oh, let's say I like really want to plan a vacation, but I'm like, I can't because I have like a work project. I don't know what's going to be
Mm.
due or whatever. It's like, okay, that whole like not being able to move forward, like it makes me feel stuck. And then I like have to go, okay, well, I
Yeah.
can plan it. I can know where I want to go. I can know what I
Mhm.
want to do. And then once I get like past that thing that's making me stuck, I can then book the trip or whatever. Like that's just a silly example, but
No, for sure.
it's the like the being stuck is the trigger. So I don't know if anybody else out there can relate to
Yeah,
that.
100%. And you know what? What you're describing is something totally normal. And when if we're thinking about, like us as humans, we don't like uncertainty. We don't like the
Mm-hmm.
unknown, right? Like we want to have the familiar. We want to be in control of that, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just feels scary, right? So it's almost like how our brain was built, like from an evolutionary
Yeah.
perspective, right? To keep us
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. It's so true though.
Yeah.
It was it was built to keep us safe. Like that's
Mhm.
absolutely right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wanted to, if it's okay with you, I wanted to
Yeah.
also mention. So I know I said that give yourself permission to be where you are, and I know that can
Yeah.
feel a little bit, like hard, but it's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
going back to that validating yourself and naming it for like what it
Mm-hmm.
feels. But another hardest part of this is, how do you cultivate and how do you practice that self compassion, which that can feel even more impossible, especially when we're grieving. But that's exactly what we need in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And so I usually encourage clients to write down evidence for their resilience, especially when they feel
Mm.
stuck. So
That's really good.
maybe it's something as simple as, like you really advocated for yourself when a doctor or a nurse minimized your concerns. When it's like, don't worry about it.
Mm.
There's nothing to worry about. But then meanwhile, you just feel it in your body that, hey, this doesn't feel right, right? And
Yeah.
we know ourselves the most. And or it could also be, like you kept showing up when it felt unbearable, like you wanted to give up, but then you kept on going, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and then have them keep that list very accessible
Mm.
to them, because
That's really good.
we do get those intrusive thoughts, like those negative automatic thoughts, the
Mm-hmm.
stuckness that comes up and the self blame. So when we have something concrete to kind of like rebattle with, with those thoughts, it can
Mm-hmm.
really make a difference.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I love that you bring up intrusive thoughts because I feel like if this is going off script again. This is what I do. I'm sorry. I'm a
No, it's
terrible
okay. I
host.
love it.
I'm a terrible host. I so intrusive thoughts is something that I've like really kind of delved into in the last couple of years because I never knew how to name them before. And
Hmm.
then I all of a sudden was like, oh, that's what that is. And this is how I can speak to it. I can just let it leave and it doesn't impact me anymore. But can you speak about intrusive thoughts, what they are and how they could be relevant to infertility or where they might come in, what some of them examples could be for people so that they can identify and know how to deal with those things? Because I feel like learning how to work with intrusive thoughts, it made my life so much easier. I'm like, oh, that's just an intrusive thought. You can just fuck right
Hmm.
off.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, when it comes to intrusive thoughts, just to kind of put it in, like in easy terms,
Mm-hmm.
it's basically, your brain is always gonna focus on something that, like you either keep thinking about, you're worried about, you're scared about. And it's going to keep on repeating that because it thinks like, hey, you know
Yep.
what, Aaron, you thought about that, like what if this or what if that, and it thinks that it's important. So
Yeah.
it will
And then you
bring
go
it
down this crazy wormhole.
up. Yeah, you go down that rabbit hole,
Yeah.
the spiral.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty much, paying attention, because a lot of the times when we keep on having the same thought repetitively, it just becomes so automatic. We don't even realize it, right? So you might have a thought that comes on and all of a sudden you're like, why am I in a bad mood all of a sudden, right? And it could be, the thought that you were having. Maybe you're thinking like, maybe I should have tried harder, or maybe, there's something wrong with me, all of those things. And
Yeah.
there's, just to go a little bit, like deeper into this,
Do it.
we have this like, area in our brain that is called the default mode network. So it's our
Mm,
default is whenever you're not focusing or concentrating on something, your mind starts to focus on yourself. Like it goes
right.
like kind of internal. And for most of us, we kind of have that negativity bias when we're thinking about ourselves. We're thinking about what we did in the past that we regret or that we should have
Mm,
done, or we're thinking about the future, like what are we scared
mm-hmm.
about, right?
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand with that. And most of the time, the intrusive thoughts are not going to be about something positive.
Yeah. No, they're like almost always negative or
Mhm.
extreme. Like I'm
Yeah.
never gonna be a mom, or like things like maybe I'd be a terrible mom, that's why this isn't working, or what did I do in another life to deserve that? Like there's just so many things that can pop in that just
Yeah.
it's our body's way of protecting ourselves. We're like our brain's trying to stop us from
Mhm.
feeling and hurting and like working through the emotions, right?
Yeah. Well, it's trying to kind of make meaning of something that is
Right.
happening, right? Because we're always, our brain is always going to try to make meaning out of it. So if you had a
Mm,
loss, or like you're struggling to conceive, or maybe like I'm not deserving to be a mom, or maybe I wasn't going to be a good mom, or all of these things, right?
yeah,
So yeah, it's
that's
kind of
so
trying to
true.
like protect you from, like future disappointments, if I could say that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 100%. Yeah, I'm just going to interject here with my snoring bulldog down beside me, my co-host. She's making an appearance. If anybody hears that, I apologize. She's doing a good job down there, just sleeping away. Okay, that was so good. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about um, how infertility, we talked a bit before about like the roller coaster and how it's so hard to like you go up and down and up and down. It's this like compounding, ongoing grief. So
Mhm.
can you speak to, because grief with infertility often comes with the cycle: hope, disappointment, hope, disappointment, hope, disappointment, and never finalizes. Like you
Mhm.
never actually get to like resolve. And so, like some people do, especially like if you do have success in the form of a baby, or even if you walk away from fertility journey and decide to be,
Yep.
childless, not by choice. Sometimes that is it. You're just like, oh, the weight's lifted off, even though you didn't get to the point that you thought you would with a child.
Mhm.
So can you just talk about how can people cope with the ongoing, or we call it rolling grief, so that up
Mhm.
and down and up and down and up and down, it's just so exhausting.
Yeah. And you know what? This is one of the most emotionally exhausting parts of infertility, or when we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to conceive. It's that kind of that relentless cycle of, hope and devastation, disappointment over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's not a single grief that you're processing and moving through, but it's, like something that we often call ambiguous loss, or, chronic sorrow. So
Mm-hmm.
grief doesn't necessarily have a clear endpoint when it comes to infertility, but comes up again with every negative test, any negative cycle, or not an implantation. So, and this
Mm-hmm.
can be so exhausting for someone that,
Yeah.
like it's relentlessly trying to control what is happening, and,
Mm-hmm.
like their future. So, I wanted to say a little bit of what's happening psychologically when it comes to this rolling grief. So
Yeah.
I often refer to Brené Brown's work on emotions. I don't
Mm.
know if you ever heard of her book. On So she does a lot of research on emotions, and in
Yeah.
her last, I don't know, it might not be the last book, but in one of her latest books, Atlas of the Heart, um,
Yes.
she has a lot of definitions about emotions. So the way she defines disappointment is essentially unmet expectations, right? And that's what
Right.
happens like with grief, and we're going through like cycles, and it's not exactly where we want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
what makes infertility so brutal is that the expectations feel both urgent and vague at the same time, right? So
Yes.
especially for women, like we can have that biological clock ticking, right? So it feels so urgent that, like, oh, I'm 38, I'm 39, I have to like really push through this without
Yeah.
having to think about it, right?
Yep.
So usually when we first start to try to get pregnant, like the expectation is very clear, like when we don't know how long it's going to take, we
Mm-hmm.
often think that, oh, if it doesn't happen in the first month, it's going to happen the second month or within a few months, right? But
Yeah.
then after we have a negative pregnancy test, after loss, those expectations become so unclear. So you're
Mm-hmm.
basically not even sure what to hope for anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
to kind of like counteract this, like disappointment without make expectations, Brené calls this having realistic expectations. I like to refer to it as grounded hope, right? Because grounded
Mm-hmm.
hope isn't about lowering your expectations or protecting yourself by expecting the worst happening, like the worst, or catastrophizing, but it's about anchoring your hope kind of in reality. So it's like kind of her, like her realistic expectation. It's the middle ground between being optimistic and then having complete pessimism, right? Like that complete resignation. And what does that look like, having that grounded hope? It's pretty much being honest with yourself about the numbers, about the statistics, about your specific diagnosis, right? So if you have a diagnosis of diminished ovarian reserve, for example, um, your first IVF cycle might not have as many egg follicles, right? So it's almost like being honest about what you're expecting or about what
Yeah.
your body has been through, right? Like maybe you need a
Yeah.
break and still and things like that. But then at
Yeah.
the same time, it's still choosing to kind of move forward with an intention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. So even like naming our expectations before going into a retrieval, before
Mhm.
going into, like might help alleviate some disappointment. Is that like would that be an appropriate way to navigate? And wanted to give like tangible tools people can do to like help maybe eliminate some of the lost hope cycle roller
Yeah,
coaster.
for sure, for sure. So it's
Mhm.
pretty much saying, like, okay, I know this embryo transfer has a 40% success rate, right? I'm
Right.
going to hope it works. Obviously, we always hope that it's going to work, but
Yeah.
I'm also going to have a plan for it if it doesn't, right? So it's almost
Yes.
like we don't go in and we're like trying to like hope for that desperation that we have,
Mhm.
to kind of have like to keep it in balance, right? So it's good to ask yourself, what am I expecting here? When
Yeah.
it comes to that, is my expectation based on reality, or
Yeah.
is it based on what I desperately want to be true? Because a lot of the times that's what we focus on at the most, right? Like that's what the
Yes. Yes. And I always found like going into a test, like the beta test, or going into a
Mhm.
retrieval, or like would always have a plan of what I was going to do like that night, if it was positive or was a negative, or if it was this or that, so that I could like get excited about either plan. Okay, if this is
Mhm.
positive, we're going to do this and celebrate, but if it's negative, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be okay. You're like, like having some plans in advance so that I knew it wasn't going to just, hit me. Also take some space for grief when you need to, but I found that
Yeah,
helped me sort of,
for sure.
you
And
know,
yeah, you bring a really good point with that. Yeah. And
mm,
I would also want to add that it's also important to find ways to experience hope and joy outside of the fertility journey, even if
yeah,
that
so
feels
important.
impossible, because we tend to kind of have our whole identity surrounded about this. Everything is
Yes.
about this, like
Hmm.
if we're thinking about taking a vacation, we're thinking like, well, hold on a second, am I gonna have to go do an egg retrieval at that
Hmm.
time, or do I have to do an embryo transfer? So we plan
Hmm.
everything around that.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. We do. And it's like all consuming. It's taking over our whole life because of that. You can't
Hmm.
like plan ahead because of what if?
Yeah. And a lot
You,
of, yeah,
no,
sorry.
no, go ahead. No, you go.
I wanted to say that a lot of my clients, they kind of, every time I bring this up, they usually kind of think that it's kind of a distraction
Mm.
from, like from what I'm going to, but I usually kind of like try to reframe it that, this is you surviving the in between, right? Because we
Yeah.
need to be able to kind of like have that, that resilience, right?
Yes,
When you like
totally.
get knocked down and you kind of like get back in by whatever way necessary.
Yeah, and you mentioned a good point, and I think we can speak this, like, what's wrong with the distraction? Distract yourself. Like I tell people that all the time in their 2-week wait, like, you've got all this time to, like, you're just worrying. Distract yourself. Go do something fun, plan something, do a puzzle, do a whatever. Distract yourself so that you're not just living in the worry and the pain and the unknown. Like, distract. There's nothing wrong with doing that, right?
But it's hard to distract yourself, right? Because going back to that, like that default mode, like the moment you're not doing anything, it keeps coming back.
I used to say when I would get a transfer or do an IUI, just, I'm going to sleep, wake me up in 15 days when we know or we don't know. I don't want to, I just want to sleep for the next couple of weeks. I never obviously could or whatever, but it's just that feeling of, I just need to get to the end. So whatever we need to do,
You're right,
we just find the coping strategy. Don't sleep through the 2 weeks, but just find the coping strategies that work.
Yeah. And you're right, because if we don't have that distraction, if you're doing nothing, that's all you're going to be thinking about is like, oh, wait, is that twinge? Oh, does that mean it's implantation?
Yes. Oh my gosh, we drive ourselves crazy with the signs and with last time it was this and that,
and
it's
using
so
Dr.
hard.
Google.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Now ChatGPT, right? Now we're into all the AI, like, it's beyond Dr. Google. It's
advanced.
Like, read my test results. Has anybody else ever
Well, I know
experienced?
for ChatGPT, it can really offer kind of that reassurance sometimes for clients,
It's so
right?
true. Yeah.
When it's almost like, instead of like calling your doctor or, like going on Google, you get instant, reassurance and validation from ChatGPT. So
I know it's a wild tool. I'm not going to lie. I love it.
I have a love-hate relationship with
I do.
AI.
Yeah, I get it. Get it.
Yeah.
That's so funny. You did touch on ambiguous loss before, so I'd love to hear more thoughts on that. And how does that concept apply to infertility and reproductive challenges?
Yeah. So basically, when it comes to, I'm going to talk about who developed the ambiguous loss, like who came up with this term, like Dr. Boss, like Dr. Pauline Boss. So basically, she describes a type of grief like that is ambiguous, that lacks clarity, that lacks closure, or that it lacks that social recognition. But she was talking about two different types. So it's the loss without death or the loss without leaving. But I find that infertility has its own category of ambiguous loss, because when you're experiencing infertility, you're grieving someone that never existed in a tangible way, but who absolutely existed to you, right? Like in your imagination or like your dreams, right? So you're grieving the baby you imagined, the family that you planned, you're grieving the version of yourself that you thought you'd become. So all of this is real loss, but because there's no body, there's no funeral, no socially recognized ritual, the world doesn't know how to hold space for it, right? So people don't bring meals, they don't send flowers, they don't ask how you're doing a few months later, right? So there's this kind of ambiguity of not knowing if this is permanent.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so powerful, because it's so true. Like, it's so true. People don't know. The world does not know. Our families don't know what to do. I know even in our infertility community, we show up for each other when we know someone's going through loss, but it's because we can directly connect to the pain, directly connect to the heart.
We've been through it, right? Like we know exactly firsthand how it happens. But a lot of people, like, they don't know how to react to this. So it's not that they have a bad intention or ill intent for that, but it's just that in general, people don't know how to sit with, hard emotions, right?
I know.
But when it comes to, like typical grief, there's that finality aspect of it, and people kind of know exactly what to do. They have the steps, but not with this.
Yeah, and there's so much toxic positivity with this, because it's like, oh, at least you got pregnant. Oh, at least, if a sentence starts with "at least," you should just stop talking. Like, there's so many things people try, and they try, but I've said to the women in my group before, nobody would ever say, if your husband died, nobody would ever be like, at least there's another man out there for you somewhere. At least you can, you can find a man. Like, it's just bananas that, like, people think it's okay to speak about infertility in this way and with these specific statements. But every time I hear another shocking thing that somebody says, I try and frame it in the way of, like, if that was your partner that died or something serious, like that, you would never say that to a person. So don't say it to somebody who's experiencing infertility or has experienced a loss of life or
Sure,
loss
yeah.
of, anything like that. It's all like grief,
That can
Yeah.
be very painful. But the way I like to look at this is that I tend to think that people have good intentions, right? When it comes to anything.
Yeah, of
So
course.
when it comes to this, a lot of the time it's almost like when you see someone that you care about that they're suffering or that they're struggling, it's almost like our brain switches into that problem solving mode. And it's almost like you're trying to kind of like, cheer them up somehow, like you're trying
Yeah,
to
of
solve the problems. Like,
course.
oh, hey,
Mhm.
at least, like good news, like you can get pregnant again,
Mhm.
right? So, but they
Yeah.
don't realize like how, because what they're trying to say might mean something different, but what it means to the person hearing it is like, you know what, your feelings are not valid. You should move faster through this. You shouldn't
Yeah.
care about this. You're kind of like
Yeah.
exaggerating it, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it can feel very invalidating. It can be
Yeah.
painful.
Well, that's such a good perspective, and you're so positive, and I think you're absolutely right. There's I don't think ill intention when our family members or our best friends are saying those things, but it would be good if we could help to train the world on this
Yes.
ambiguous loss issue.
Mhm.
So we'll try. We'll do it in a really nice way, not the Aaron way.
Well, I usually say that for people that don't know how to react, just say that. Like if you don't
Yeah,
know what to say, just say that. Hey, I don't know
yeah,
what you're going through. It must
hmm
be really hard. I just don't
yeah,
know what to do. What do you need from me, right? So
yeah,
you don't have to
yeah.
go into that problem solving mode. You can just ask what the person needs.
Yeah. I've been in experiences in my own life where somebody's going through something I've never been through, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to say or what to do. And it's all I
Yep,
can offer is, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry you're going through that. Like, can I sit with you in the dark? Can I sit with you?
for sure.
Can I come alongside you? Like, what do you need? You don't know? Okay, I don't know either. So let's just be in that space together or
Yeah.
something, because it's so hard to know. Oh my gosh, we're getting close to the end of this episode. It's gone so fast.
I was telling you, I think we can have at least 2 hours just talking over and over. Yeah.
Uh, well, I'm gonna have to ask you one last question, and then
Mhm.
I want people to know where they can find you. But finally, what message would you want to leave with someone who's grieving after loss or struggling with infertility right now?
So, um, I'm gonna leave you with a question instead of like like an advice. So if
I
you're
love
finding yourself in the thick of this right now, like you're right in the maze of infertility, and
that.
I'm gonna leave you with a question that might not be necessarily for right now, maybe not for months or years, or it could even be for right now, but eventually I want you to ask yourself, what am I learning about myself through this, right? And through
Mm,
this, I don't mean it in any when like find your silver lining kind of way, but generally ask yourself, what are you discovering about yourself? So going back to like being curious about yourself, about your patterns, but maybe you can ask, what have you noticed about how you can handle when you thought you can handle anymore? What do you need from people around you when you're going
yeah,
through a hard time? What did you learn about how you grieve, how you cope, and how you keep going, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
whether you wanted this or not, this is actually teaching you things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Honestly, like self-awareness, it can be a really hard journey because it's very confronting to learn about yourself and know who you are, like in the depths
Mhm,
of your core of who you are. But it's
mhm,
actually, in my experience, the most freeing thing you can actually experience, because you learn to value who you are, you learn to love who you are, you learn to be confident in who you are, the more you learn about yourself and become
right?
self-aware. So this is such good advice, because I think, if especially on this journey, if you can learn about how you're coping and how you're dealing, you'll have so much more grace for yourself. You'll have so much more empathy for yourself, just like you would for your best friend, just like you would for your mother if she was going through this, or
Mhm.
anybody in your life that you love. So it's a great advice. Thank
Yeah,
you.
for sure. Because otherwise, you just go on automatic pilot, right? Like if you don't become
Yeah.
aware, if you're not aware of that. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Totally.
Mhm.
So good. Thank you so much. You've given us so much wisdom and compassion tonight. And thank you for the incredible work that you do, supporting families in all of these vulnerable times and moments. I want to get you to tell us all about where people can find you. But before I do that, the first place they're going to find you, and we
Mhm.
did this episode tonight for a reason, because
Mhm.
next weekend is the Canadian Fertility Show. So if you don't have tickets yet,
Mhm.
you need to get there. Delia is going to be there on the stage talking about this. Why don't you tell people a little bit about your talk? You want to go to CanadianFertilityShow.ca. You can get tickets. And we actually have an Oasis code, which I'm going to put on the screen while you tell us a little bit about the talk that you're going to do at the show next week.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you for having me tonight. This was a pleasure. Like, I love talking about this. So I will be at the Canadian Fertility Show. I will have a booth there. You can find me at booth number 1. You can come by, grab one of our swag bags and some resources. And I will also have a speech where I'm talking about the infertility maze and the trauma behind it. So I think there's going to be a lot of more information there that I can give compared to tonight.
Oh, that's going to be so good.
Yeah, and people can find me. So I do have a group practice called Get Reconnected Psychotherapy Services. So you can find me at getreconnected.ca. I'm on all platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and you can also find me on Instagram as Fertility with Delia. So I have that as a little bit of a separate for just fertility stuff.
Yes, amazing. So Get Reconnected, that's where you can find Delia. You do couples, you do individual. This is very exciting for our community. Cannot wait to see you next weekend and give you a hug in person to say thank you for coming on the live tonight.
I'm looking forward to that.
Everybody, yes, that's October 18th. We're in 2025. If you're listening to this in like 2028, please ignore this part of the episode. But October 18th. If you are listening to it in 2028, there's probably another fertility show coming up. We're probably all going to be there. So get your butts there. It's at the Westin Harbor Castle in Toronto. It's going to be an amazing, amazing day. You do not want to miss this. So thank you so much. We will be back next week. Marissa will be back next week hosting our episode of Fertility Village Live. I think we're going to be showing some fertility books and featuring some authors who've written. Actually, no, I apologize. That's in 2 weeks. Next week, we've got Kaylee and Sarah, and they're going to be talking about resources for pregnancy and infant loss. So definitely show up. You're going to want to hear from them. Okay, thanks, everybody. We're 2 minutes over time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in tonight. If you're here and if you're listening later, wherever you are in your journey today, you're not alone, and you don't have to walk this path alone. Oasis FSN if you want to join a support group. And we'll see you back another time for an awesome conversation. Good night. Thanks again, Delia.
Nice.
Great to see you.